You are listening to ESL Talk, a podcast made for English teachers by English teachers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of ESL Talk.
I'm Fey.
And I'm Daniel.
Building on our topic of teaching young learners last week, we have another brand new episode all about teaching for immigration purposes.
Yes, and this week we'll discuss about the different language tests students take for immigration purposes and how you as a teacher can help your students in achieving their goals.
And our special guest today, Maria, she's from a company called English for Canada, will be sharing her advice and experience working with students to help prepare them for proficiency tests needed to move to a new country.
Yeah, we've both had a little bit of experience on this topic, so I'm looking forward to talking to you about this to begin. So tell me, first of all, Faye, what's been your experience with test prep for immigration, maybe as a non-teacher and then also as a teacher?
Right. Yeah. So as a teacher, like I mentioned before, I just mostly worked with IELTS and mostly for speaking. But my experience with that has been more as an immigrant myself, right? I had to take the IELTS and a French proficiency test when I went through my Canadian immigration process. Yeah, at the time we needed like the whole point system thing, and we needed a little bit more points. And so my husband and I had to take the French proficiency exam as well. So the IELTS was quite challenging, even though I was a completely fluent speaker and also a teacher already at the time. It's just a lot of skills management, right? Time management. I learned very quickly that I had no time to read everything in the reading section. I had no second chances for the listening. So if anybody dropped a bottle or anything and I missed a word, that was it, right? So a lot to cope with and to accept and come to terms with when it comes to the IELTS exam. But the biggest challenge for me was the French proficiency test. And because I actually started from zero in the language. Wow. Yeah, we had zero French knowledge. And we're like,
so how long did it take you to get to a decent level?
Yeah, we had lessons for 1 year. We had a private tutor from France, and we met her once a week, every week for a couple hours, which is not enough unless you're going to do a lot of the work yourself. So it's a good lesson for me as to what our students have to go through, right? And we have actually had to do a lot of studying on our own, but we got there. We got the level we needed. It wasn't very high, but it was a lot of stress to go through, like IELTS, French test, plus the whole immigration process itself. Yeah, it's just so much pressure, right? What about for you? Because you're also an immigrant to Canada, but I don't think you had to do the IELTS test.
I did have to do the IELTS test.
You did?
Yeah. This is a misconception that a lot of people have, which is understandable. It doesn't matter your background, your nationality. If you're applying for permanent resident status or to immigrate to Canada, you do need to complete a language proficiency test. And I had to do the IELTS exam. And you might think, oh, that must have been really easy for you. That must have been like a piece of cake. Well, actually, the actual speaking, listening, reading, writing, those things were fine, but it was, like you mentioned, the skills management, the time management, knowing the test process and the procedure. And a lot of native speakers really fall down on this because they just think, oh, it's easy. I just have a chat with someone in English and read something and listen. And a lot of them don't perform very well. Some of them get band 7 or even below sometimes, and they're shocked and they're disgusted. But again, it's, for me, I did the academic and I did the general, like I did both of them just to get a feel. And, there's a reason why it's academic, because you need academic skills. And even in the general test, you still need to be able to, demonstrate that you have followed the instructions and followed what's required. Because if you're asked to speak for 2 minutes about something and you speak for 30 seconds, then you're not fulfilling what's being asked of you, and that's going to affect your score. So it was more difficult than I thought it would be. I mean, I got a almost perfect score, which I should have, but actually, but you talk about the listening, you only get one chance to listen. I did miss one of the answers. So there we go.
That's why I couldn't get my perfect score either. I think I had an 8.5, but it was just like a half a point in the listening and something in the writing as well. Because, it's just so much.
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to students, Faye, do a lot of students, when they come to you to work with you, is it about immigration as their end goal or their final destination?
I've been getting more inquiries for that recently because of my Instagram, but I don't really specialize in IELTS or CELPIP or any of those. So I normally refer them to someone else like you or Maria, who we're going to talk to today. But I do get a lot of people who are coming to Canada. A lot of my current students are either immigrants that are already here or are in the process of immigrating. And they want to learn more of the actual English spoken in Canada and the day-to-day conversations and the culture. And that's kind of the focus of my focus right now as well, is teaching that like real spoken English or even like written English, but what we actually use in day-to-day interactions. And I've actually often get students asking me about the visa processes itself, and I'm like, I'm not a consultant,
right?
But there's just a lot that these students deal with, right? And there's a lot of expectations, so it can be really hard for them to even find their way or navigate who to go to. Do you get a lot of these students yourself?
Yep. I've done a lot of work, mainly with students who want to immigrate, not just to Canada, but also to the US, to the UK, Australia, and they need that proficiency either in IELTS or, TOEFL or TOEIC, depending on the country. So I've worked with those kind of students. A lot of them, either nurses or doctors or engineers, or they have a pretty extensive background, and their goal is, well, I need this score because I want to move to X country or I want to live in Y country. So it is pretty common right now, and knowing that can be helpful, because having gone through the journey myself, obviously albeit a different one, then I can kind of help them and guide them as well. So I do have a lot of experience with that. So I guess connected with that, what are some of the problems or the issues that, when you're teaching students who solely just want to immigrate, that's the only reason they're learning? How do you kind of deal with that?
Well, the stakes are incredibly high. The pressure is enormous on both the student and the teacher. We mentioned this before too, but the expectations are definitely something that needs to be managed and addressed early on. Students are making life-changing decisions, and their future literally depends on their performance on these tests. And they often don't realize that 90% of the work is their own, not the teachers.
Yes.
Right? They feel like if I hired Daniel and he's an expert in this, he's going to get me that score. No, you're going to facilitate, or you're going to guide the students towards that goal, but the work is their own. And I think that that's really challenging, right? What do you think? Has that been your experience?
I would say so. Yeah. A lot of students are not prepared to, not all, but some students, they're not prepared to kind of realize that they're going to have to do a lot of work themselves. And the students that do listen and do try to follow the feedback, they'll generally, achieve the score that they want to. But some students just think, well, I'll just do the lessons, and I don't want to do the homework, or I don't want to do this. Yeah. And if you just want to practice just conversational, you don't have an ultimate goal, and that's fine. But those students need to have that motivation, and I can guide and provide all the tools. But if you can't, get the motivation to do that, then it's going to be difficult. I'll always try to motivate students and push them in a positive way, but ultimately it's up to the students, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what are some of the main issues you see that some of these tests that students fail to address?
I think when it comes to IELTS, they underestimate exactly what the test is and how to successfully navigate it, because it is an exam, it is testing your skills, and it's looking for very specific things. So as I'm sure we'll hear from Maria, it's all about getting those band descriptors, printing them off, memorizing them as best you can, because what you want to do essentially is you want to give the examiner what's on the paper. That's how they assess your proficiency. So if you give them what they want, then that's fine.
The checklist is right there, right? So just make sure you study it.
It sounds easier said than done.
Of course,
provided you follow that and you learn that inside out, and you practice those skills and those specific types of skills. It's not fair because it's not a true reflection to a big extent, but again, by providing that, then you're giving them what they want, what they need, and that will help you. And then I guess the other one is, sometimes you have to do some relearning, and students are very resistant to relearning anything because it's, well, this is how I was taught before, or this is what I've done before. But if that isn't working for them, and that's why they're in the position they are now, then they need to kind of have an open mind and ask them to consider things. So that's about negotiation and questioning students well and working with them to help them relearn some of those skills. So how can we change the mindset of our students to help them be successful? Because I've kind of just touched on it a little, but what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think in a more global sense, speaking as an immigrant myself, for immigration, not just for taking the test, students need to take ownership of their own studies, of their performance and their limitations. And I mean, the life of an immigrant is incredibly hard, as you know, and you can't rely on others or blame the government or teachers or whoever for your failures or shortcomings. I mean, you can, but it won't help you. I haven't met a single immigrant who had a smooth sailing immigration process. There's always something. You get something rejected, or a failed test, or some missing document that you need to rush to go get, or something you didn't realize you had to have, or there's always something that will delay your process and nothing will go exactly as you planned. Okay. So it applies to the test as well. And that's just a good mindset to have as an immigrant and as a test taker.
Yeah. And kind of just building a little bit on what I just said before, I think having an open mind, being aware of things might be a little bit different to what you might have done before, and just having that open mind and trying to listen to the feedback and take it on board, I think is crucial as well.
Well, we have only just started to explore this topic, so let's bring in Maria, who is going to help us go much deeper into this fascinating discussion.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the interview portion of today's podcast. Very happy to welcome our guest, Maria. Hi, Maria.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks so much for joining us. So we have a few questions that we want to ask you, obviously, about test prep, and especially for immigration. So, Maria, can you just first tell us a little bit about yourself and your teaching journey so far?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I started teaching English over 10 years ago. I was tutoring at UBC, which is the University of British Columbia here. And at the time, I wasn't actually studying to become an English teacher. I was studying music, and I just started to really fall in love with teaching. And I realized that it was something that just came very naturally to me, and I fell in love with the profession. And I decided to do my CELTA, which is actually where I met Fey when I was working at International House. And then I just kind of fell into it naturally. And ever since then, I've been working with specifically English proficiency tests, like a whole bunch of them, all the Cambridge tests and all the ones that you'd use for any immigration process.
And what drew you to those tests? Why did you decide to start teaching for tests specifically?
To be totally honest, I got kind of thrown into it. I had been teaching general English at a lot of the schools that I've been working at. It just so happened that there was a semester where they were short on exam prep teachers. And I looked at my schedule, and all of a sudden I was responsible for teaching CPE, CAE, FCE, and TOEFL. And then all of a sudden they shoehorned in IELTS prep on top of it. And I remember going, oh my goodness, what are all these acronyms? And having to quickly understand and learn everything, like all this EFR, the standards and everything, and just understand the different frameworks, kind of the different tests. And it was a huge learning curve. And it was definitely a big change from teaching students general English to getting them prepared for a test, which obviously there's an overlap, but there was a huge learning curve there. And then once I got a hang of it, I don't know, I just love teaching exam prep now.
Awesome. Well, we know that now you focus a lot on helping students with those exams that are for immigration specifically to Canada. Yeah. What are some things that teachers don't think about or that they need to consider when preparing these students specifically that have these bigger goals in mind?
Well, there's quite a lot of things, I would say. One of them is that you'd have to stay abreast of the immigration policies. And I know that we're not immigration professionals, we're not lawyers, but it is important for us to stay on top of what's going on. And that's because there are so many different types of programs and streams and ways that people can come to Canada through provincial programs or federal programs. And within the federal programs, there's a bunch of different pathways or streams that they can come. And when someone contacts you, they'll usually come to you with a bunch of lingo and, tell you a little bit about their story. And if you don't understand a little bit about, I would say more than a little bit, if you don't thoroughly understand the processes and exactly what they're applying for, it kind of shows that you don't really understand their needs.
Yeah.
And they won't trust you as much. So if you can quickly understand, like, oh yeah, I understand that program, or you understand the latest changes, it creates a sense of trust immediately and just awareness of what's going on. So I think that's really important. But I mean, aside from that, understanding the immigration processes, you also have to understand that just what's at stake here. Because a lot of these students, I would say all of them, they're planning on changing their lives and coming to Canada or studying abroad. Maybe they're not coming to Canada. Maybe they're taking the academic IELTS or the TOEFL to go to the States or to a European country. It's a huge change, and that can cause a lot of test anxiety. So when you're preparing a student for an exam that is going to mean a life-changing decision, be ready to be helping and supporting a student that is probably very anxious, very stressed out, and that can, really affect their learning. It really does affect their learning. Most students struggle with test anxiety, and not everybody, we can't generalize, but it does affect their performance. And a lot of them do end up kind of venting in class. And you have to be, I would say, a little bit open to hearing a little bit of their personal gripes and what they're going through. And if that doesn't make you feel comfortable, then maybe exam prep is not the right fit, because they will eventually tell you how they're feeling in class, how stressed they're feeling about the prep, or how frustrated they're feeling about it. Maybe they've taken the test tons of times, and you got to be ready for that and to be there supporting them. And I think that emotional support is a huge part of an exam prep class.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to kind of build on that a little bit, Maria, how do you deal with the frustration and the anxiety of students if they miss their target score by a fine margin? Because we know with these programs, especially for immigration, the margins are so fine and the points are so fine. So how do you deal with that as a teacher and kind of as a guide?
Well, one thing that I've chosen is, like, I personally don't teach group classes, and that's an intentional decision. I want to have that one-on-one connection with my students. I feel like in a group class, there's nothing against a group class. Just I feel like in a group class, I wasn't able to really connect and understand each student's needs and give them that personalized feedback and guidance. And in a one-on-one class, I found that students were more open to telling me, what's going on. And a lot of them come to me and tell me their emotional barriers, like what's going on with, in their personal lives, or they tell me a little bit more about maybe like some sort of struggle that they're facing with their, immigration process, or like the trauma they face with their English. Maybe someone's made fun of them at school about their English, or they feel ashamed about learning. And I just listen to them and we talk about it. It kind of feels like I'm like a therapist in English, and I'm by no means professional in that field. But it does create a sense of we build a rapport when we're in class. And when you build that rapport with the student, they feel so much more comfortable with you. They tend to relax, and then they perform better. They start to actually speak. Now, I understand that when they go to a test, they're not going to have that rapport with an examiner. So, I mean, obviously that won't translate directly to a test environment. But you can get them to start producing a lot more than what I would say in a group environment, where they might be feeling a little bit shy. In a group environment, they might not want to speak up, especially in an online setting where they're just a box on Zoom.
Yeah, very true. I mean, that's interesting because, like you said, if you have a group class, they all have different motivations. Although all of your students seem to want to immigrate, they might have different filters and things going on in the background. So I guess that's a really good point. Now, in terms, sorry, go ahead.
And in a group class, I think everyone might start with the same objective, but life changes and our schedules kind of, get in the way. And I think that some people might fall behind, and those students, if they fall behind, it's hard as a teacher to kind of keep up with them. And with the personalized class or, one-on-one setting, you can adapt things a lot easier. You can tailor the session according to what they need. So I think that in a situation where they're experiencing anxiety as it is, it's important to be flexible and to help them with what they need.
Yeah, we talked about this as well in one of our previous episodes when we talked more specifically about teaching for exams, not necessarily for immigration. And we talked a bit about expectations, right? Student expectations. And in your case, apart from expecting a lot from their language improvement skills and all that, how do you go about setting their expectations in terms of their immigration and their process?
Well, expectations is actually one of the challenges that I've been facing as of late, especially because a lot of people, I would say most, underestimate the tests. Either they're underestimating the test or they're overestimating their English. I'm not sure exactly what happens with each person, but most people contact me, let's say, a week before their test. And they think that I can, wave a magic wand and boost their band score right away. And I'm very transparent and honest. So what I usually do initially is I do an initial assessment to see where they're at. And the average, proficiency level is usually like intermediate level. I mean, let's say that's usually where people kind of plateau, like B1-ish. Some people might get a B2, but most people need a band 7 or at least like C1 advanced proficiency on these tests to merit some sort of, getting accepted at a college. Maybe they can get a band 6, but like if they want to immigrate, they usually have to get a pretty high band score to be competitive. And what happens is they're usually about 1 or 2 proficiency levels away from their goal. And that's where the tough conversation comes in, where I have to be very gentle and honest and tell them like, look, we can get there together and we can definitely work towards that goal, but it's not going to happen in a week.
Right.
And some people don't want to hear that and they never talk to me again. And
they think the problem is you.
They think that's okay. Like I'm not going to take on the responsibility of somebody who, thinks that they can improve 2 proficiency levels, like you boost their band score by 2 proficiency, but from a band 5 to a band 7, for example. Let's just give you this for example. In a week. It's just not feasible and it's not realistic. These tests aren't cookie cutter tests and they are testing somebody's true proficiency level. I think people assume that they're a scam or that they're that they can just memorize expressions and learn off of like a YouTube channel just by memorizing expressions and that's all they need, but it's not the case.
Yeah, that's really good advice because like we mentioned earlier, but before we started recording, there is so much bad advice out there. And students are, they want to find information, they want help. So a quick Google search might bring up 10 results and maybe 8 or 9 of those results are totally leading students down the wrong path. So it's really difficult.
I can give you an example of a very honest conversation I had with somebody recently. Obviously, I'm not going to say their name, but this particular candidate or student contacted me literally on a Sunday and her test was the following Saturday. Wow. And she was really, really like stressed and contacted me on a Sunday on Instagram. And I managed to fit her in for lessons with me every day, Monday through Friday. But I was very transparent with her. Like, look, you're at B1, like you're at intermediate proficiency and you need C1 advanced. You're 2 proficiency levels away. I can take a look and see what's going on, but we're not going to get you to C1 advanced in 5 days. And I told her that from the beginning. And I'm like, I'm more than happy to help you, but only if you understand that's the situation from the get-go. So we did the 5 classes, and at the end, she kind of turned it around on me again. And she was like, oh, I thought I would have by now. And I'm like, well, that's not the case. And then at the end, because she was preparing for the CELPEP, she's like, okay, what do you think if I switch to the IELTS? And I said to her, that's not going to make a difference. There's no point in switching from this.
Even worse now, because it's a
she said,
test.
I saw an IELTS test available next week. What do you think about switching to the IELTS? Can we do the IELTS prep for a week? And I just said to her, look, I'm not going to put you in my schedule next week for IELTS prep. It doesn't make a difference if you take the IELTS or the CELPEP. Like, they're both proficiency tests. And yes, they have similarities and there are big differences in format. And I mean, I talk about this all the time on my webpage, on my feed and all that stuff. And and I have people ask me this all the time, like, which test is easier?
Right. Yeah.
That's not really the right question you want to ask.
Yeah, it's the mindset, isn't it? Of, it's not about which test is easier or perceived to be better than the other. It's are you ready? Are you prepared? Is your level sufficient enough to be able to take the test to achieve the score you want?
And I just had to tell her, I'm like, look, it doesn't matter if you switch to the IELTS, your proficiency level is just not there yet. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You just have to study a little bit more and improve your overall proficiency to get there. And that's not going to happen in 5 more days. She never responded.
It makes sense. I think, and I've been in that situation so many times as well, Maria, where, depending, because, there's different context culturally or, whatever they might be used to in the past. And some students have never been told no. Some students have never been told you can't do this, or you can't buy this, or you can't find a shortcut. You just have to work through it. This actually kind of ties into the next thing I wanted to ask you, Maria, and it's about costs and fees, because I work with students from all ranges of the spectrum in terms of backgrounds, nationality, in terms of their socioeconomic situation. So would you say the cost of these tests is fair and reasonable for students? And, there's a huge amount on the line for them. So how do you work with those financial, parameters?
Well, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, if somebody prepares for the test properly and they take it once, maybe twice, then it's not that unfeasible if they prepare for it properly. What happens is, and what I see happen more often than not, is that somebody doesn't want to invest in proper test prep, and they depend on random Google searches, random YouTube channels that are totally leading them in the wrong direction, guiding them with memorized expressions, guiding them with hacks and tips and tricks that actually will shoot them in the foot. And then they go to the test and they use all these magic tricks that, they've been told will magically get them that CLB9 or that Band 7 or whatever it is that they need. And then they have to keep taking the test over and over again. So that's where things get expensive, because I have people contact me all the time saying, I've taken the test 7, 8, or 9 times. So not only does that get ridiculously expensive, it's extremely stressful. Stressful. And then that just increases their test anxiety, because every time they take the test, they're more and more anxious and frustrated. Now, in terms of how much the test costs, like obviously the British Council and IDP and in Paragon testing, or the TOEFL and the Cambridge University, I don't understand exactly all the back end logistics of all the pricing. So I can't speak on that, about whether or not it's a fair price. But I mean, obviously they've got to pay all their staff fair price, all fair salaries and whatnot. So it's hard to say exactly if the pricing of the test is fair, but I can say that if people prepare properly, they shouldn't have to take the test more than once or twice. Twice I can understand. Like maybe the first time they got really nervous, or maybe they tried the test without preparing, and then they realized, after the first time, maybe I should prepare. That's okay. But if they're just being stubborn and preparing and taking the test 5, 6, or 7 times without preparing properly, then I don't think it's worth the money.
It's tough because it's all about perceived value for them, right? For everyone. But students think that, okay, the test costs however much, $500 for me to take. With $500, I'll get this many lessons. I'll just take the test, and if I don't pass it, I'll take it again. But then they end up doing it again and again, and like you said, it just gets worse. They don't get better at it. If just taking the test more times doesn't make you better at it, just makes you more nervous about it.
That's a really good point, Faye. I probably had this same conversation more than 100 times on various platforms, groups, where someone says, I got a 6.5 in writing. I'm going to pay for reassessment. I was unlucky, or I'm going to take the test again because it was bad luck. And I'm just thinking, and the amount of times when people say, should I go for it? And I'm like, well, you can, but you have no control over that situation.
Exactly.
Whereas, why didn't you invest that $300 let's say, for example, why don't you invest that $300 in a writing course or one-to-one writing feedback on tuition? And then that way, the next time, you know exactly what your errors are, you know exactly what the issues are, you know what to focus on, what to improve, and you get that feedback. So next time, you don't have to rely on luck, even though it isn't luck. Again, it's a mindset thing, isn't it? And it's positioning things in the right way for students. It's really
because
difficult.
It's work, right? It's work for them. Getting more classes, it's more work for them.
Exactly.
I do feel like there's some, Faye, you said something like a perceived pricing. Like I feel like there's a bit of a distortion in our industry about what our services are worth, as well as English teachers. That's like, I mean, you meant, I don't know if this is exactly on topic of what you were asking about the pricing of the test itself, but in terms of pricing our services as English teachers and professionals, as an exam prep professional, I mean, the number of hours and training that we go through to become English teachers and to become teachers specialized in exam prep. It's like I can't even count it. And it's just so much time and investment and commitment, and the additional time you spend prepping a class, and the additional time you spend supporting the student, and the additional pressure that you feel because you know that this person's family's like whole future is on the line as well.
Exactly.
And so to be totally transparent, I do get quite offended when people come to me and they're like, oh, yeah, but I saw so-and-so charging $15 an hour on Craigslist. I'm like, well, then go to so-and-so. I'm not so-and-so on Craigslist. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm very passionate about what I do. And I know that I can make a difference. And I will take care of you with I will really invest my time and energy in each and every one of your sessions with me. I'm not somebody who's going to take your money and just run and go. And
That's
I think it's sort of, I don't know what it is, what's going on with our industry, but I feel like it's getting a little bit devalued. I don't know if it's always been like this or if it's the pandemic, but I feel like as of late, I've been getting a lot of people kind of, haggling a little bit more. And it's maybe because of social media, or maybe it's like I don't know what it is. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think that's a great point. Just to give you my 2 cents on that, Maria. I generally just say, this is the pricing. These are my testimonials. These are results that I've got. This is, essentially, I think this is a great message for our listeners. Don't ever settle for less than your worth.
Exactly.
Because if you start to slide even just 5%, then the next person might expect that. And I think the problem is right now, Maria and Fey as well, is because there's so many students wanting to learn English, and a lot of them just want to learn English, and they're used to getting things for free. So when you turn around and say, I can help you, but it's going to cost you this, or, I can offer you this, they're very reluctant to spend, because all of us, I mean, with other things in life, but we're the generation that grew up downloading music for free, maybe illegitimately, watching movies when we should have been paying, these kind of things, for example. And we get into that mindset. So when it comes to education, we don't perceive it as worth as much as other things. And the other issue as well with that is, and I've had this conversation 5 or 6 times with students, like the messages I'm sure you get, where the test costs $300. So you can take the test and hope and pray that you've got everything right and you're ready and you're going to get the score that you want, or you can spend that money to prepare yourself, see your areas where you need to improve, get the feedback, get the guidance, get the advice, and do it properly. But again, some people still don't want to do that.
It ends up being way cheaper to prepare properly the first time than taking the test tons of times. And one thing I say to people when they do ask for, like you said, aside from sending reviews and just valuing your worth, I always say to people as well, we charge the same price for the same services for everybody. I don't think it's fair to charge one price for one person and another for another person.
Yeah, that's true.
That's not fair. Like, what if then the person finds out, hey, why did they get charged X and I get charged Y? That's not cool. So I don't think it's fair. Everyone should pay the same price, and it should be based on what your experience and your qualifications, whatever you see that as fit. And somebody should judge you for that. And that's I'm just curious about what you.
There's one thing, a piece of advice I got when I just started out teaching. This was like back many years ago when I was in Brazil and I had no teacher training, but I knew a teacher who was very good, and I had a chat with him, and he said, okay, first thing you need to remember, you don't want to be known as the cheap teacher. You want to be known as the great teacher, the one that will get students to where they want to go and to achieve their goals. And that really stuck with me. It's like, I don't want somebody recommending me because they're like, oh yeah, go have classes with Fey. She's really cheap.
Yeah.
But I want them to go and say, go have classes with Fey because she helped me incredibly, or she got me to the band I needed. So I think that's a really good lesson for our listeners as well. If you're just starting out.
Providing quality and not.
It's your name that you're going to be building, right? That's your brand. So,
and if we provide that, the price should be irrelevant, really. It shouldn't be a huge issue.
That's what I focus on. And I feel like maybe the pandemic has kind of shifted the terrain a little bit, in the sense that there's so many more people out there teaching. And I feel like maybe because there's a lot of people who haven't had their teaching certifications, they assume that because they speak English fluently, that they can teach willy-nilly online and they make an extra buck. But that's not, as you guys know, I mean, we're all professionals in this. So it's not really the case. And then we get compared to that, but we know that that's not the case. So Anyways, maybe I went off a tangent.
No. It's a really valid, useful point. And like you said, there's so many teachers out there, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's so many good teachers. This is a great opportunity now to differentiate yourself and show what makes you maybe a better fit than some of those teachers. Not saying they don't have their place in the market. Of course they do, but it just depends on you know, what you offer and what makes you different to everyone else. Exactly. All right. So in terms of the actual preparation and getting things ready for the exams, what do you think is one element of the test that many students neglect to focus on?
Oh, well, this really does depend on the student. Some students struggle more on the receptive skills and the productive skills, especially for those who need like a CLB9 on the IELTS, or they really struggle on getting that band 8 on the listening test. But I would say most students, they don't prepare for the writing test efficiently, and they assume that they can depend on hacks and tips and tricks off the internet instead of really honing in on and working on improving their general overall fluency. Because I'll give you a simple something I see all the time. People try to shoehorn in really advanced vocabulary or lexis into their responses, assuming that, if I add this very flowery academic lexis and language into my responses, I'm automatically going to get a higher band score. But if that language is used incorrectly or inappropriately, it actually works against them. And so the students or candidates have to actually use the language appropriately and in the right context. So that's where I think students struggle more. They try to force themselves to be where they're not by depending on memorized expression or cookie cutter lines to get them a higher band score, when in truth that actually can lower their band score, because a trained professional in this field can quickly identify when somebody is depending on language that's not theirs, which ultimately just shows us that, hey, this person's not ready yet. This person needs to depend on lexis that's not theirs to get their point across.
Absolutely. And sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, that's the reason why these exams are the ones used for immigration purposes, right? They are not, they're tests that should test you as a full speaker in all aspects of your communication, and it has to be natural. So that makes total sense.
Yeah,
it's actually incredible how simple and how basic you could write a response for task 1 and task 2 and still achieve a 7. You just have to make sure that the fundamentals and the basics are there, and that you follow the band descriptors, the public band descriptors, which are available. You can follow those if you study those as your Bible, so to speak. And make sure that you're consistently following them. Then you can achieve a 7 with a pretty, not basic, but a fairly, succinct, detailed, developed, but not too advanced level. I think it's definitely possible.
The public band descriptors, they do have some jargon that could intimidate a test taker or a candidate. So I would encourage, I know that your listeners aren't students, but I mean, as a teacher, I think that it's important to support your student with those band descriptors in the class, and then try and simplify that language. So when they go, what does lexical resource mean? You go, hey, that just means vocabulary, right? So try to kind of explain to them what these terms mean to help them not feel so intimidated, because they're already in a bit of a scary environment preparing for these tests.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Break it down for what is a collocation? What does that mean? Or what is an idiomatic expression? Trying to give them examples of these terms in the public band descriptors. Of course, those public band descriptors can be found on any of these websites. Same with the CELPIP. You can find the performance standards on their website. You can explain to them exactly how they're going to be assessed. Now, of course, it takes a lot of training and prep as a teacher to understand those band descriptors and performance standards. But that's perhaps
part of it.
Part of the whole gig.
Well, you've given lots of really good practical tips and advice here. Is there anything you would want to leave our listeners with as a final piece of advice for teachers who are considering teaching these exams for immigration?
Yes, definitely be prepared to study a lot outside of the class to really understand how the candidate is or your student is going to be assessed. Even though, at the end of the day, your student will have to improve their overall English fluency, there is a component of understanding the assessment criteria or the performance standards or how they're going to be tested. And if you don't understand that, let's say a matrix or the rubrics and how they're going to be assessed, it's hard to teach them as a whole. You want to kind of support them in a more complete way. And also be prepared for some test anxiety and to be there to support them throughout that journey.
Great. Yeah.
And if that might not make you feel comfortable, I have met some teachers that just don't like that part of it, where they feel like students complain or they vent a lot in class, and maybe yours won't. In my experience, most of mine do. And that's just part of it. And I actually like it because I feel like I can provide them that emotional support and be there for them when they're like, hold their hand while they're going through that process.
That's great.
Yeah. So, and just really be prepared to study a lot, to understand the performance standards in and out, and to provide them that really detailed feedback. And those personalized corrections will make all the difference so that your students can get the results they need.
Great advice. Yeah. And if possible, maybe take the test yourself. That really helped me a lot.
Yeah, that does help, because then you can understand their experience and the test experience. The test environment makes a big difference as well.
It is. Yeah. It really opened my eyes to a lot. That was great. Thank you so much, Maria. I learned so many things, as I'm sure our listeners did too. And I really appreciate you taking out the time to talk about, your expertise and knowledge. I'm sure our listeners can take a lot away from this. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that you guys have fun. And if there's one last thing I could say is, like, try to not encourage, like, to avoid teaching memorized stuff. Like, really get your students to be as natural as possible. Natural speaking, natural writing is important.
And how can our listeners get in touch with you, Maria, if they want to connect after this episode?
Yeah, they can find me. My school is called English for Canada. We're specialized in Canadian immigration. You can find us at englishforcanada.com, for is FOR. And we have an Instagram page and YouTube channel, english.for.canada on Instagram. And YouTube, you can find us at English for Canada. So we've got a blog and fun YouTube channel. We post a lot about Canadian culture and lifestyles and Canadian accents. I mean, I've got a Vancouverite accent. That's where I was born and raised. I don't know how thick of a Canadian accent I've got, but apparently I've got one. When I go to the States, people make fun of me a little bit, but I don't notice it. I guess you guys can be better judges of that.
I definitely recommend people follow you on Instagram as well. It's really, really useful and enlightening for people who want to come here.
And and my goal is to always be transparent and honest with people. I don't want anybody to take the test and feel stooped into memorizing stuff. I want always people to feel supported and to get the truth when they're preparing. So if you guys need any tips or anything, just message me.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you again, Maria. Thanks everyone for listening to our episode today.
And remember to subscribe to receive the latest episodes each Wednesday. You can follow us on Instagram at ESL Talk Podcast, or you can send us an email to esltalkpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Learning with Fey.
Or you can find me at I'm Daniel Teacher. That's all we have time for this week. Be sure to join us again next week for another brand new episode of ESL Talk.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes and to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for even more ESL teaching content.